Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Today we will get the Farmall H as far as we can go before we need to have the warmer painting weather return to take care of the rest of the bare metal parts. So this is going to be the last installment probably for several weeks. As you just watched, I've removed the harnesses that I made last time and got them on the bench over here. We're ready to give them the final wrap and the sheathing and tidy all this mess right up. One thing I want to show y'all, before I take a newly made harness completely off the tractor, I will do a complete wrap on all the areas where I want to maintain the bend or the contour that it had while it was on the machine. Because if you can wrap them tightly before you take it off, it's going to help to retain all of those lines and features and accents, all that good stuff. And a few questions in the comment section wondering what I was going to sheathe the harness with. If I was going to go with like the original cloth weave, you certainly can, and it's out there. It's easy to find. Personally, I don't really prefer that myself. I've got my own tastes, but you can certainly put it on your own. This is very much build your own type of stuff, so do what you think is best. But what I'm going to use today is this right here. It's a freight resistant scissor cut expandable braided sleeving. Got 3 diameters. This is a 1/2 inch. We got 3/8 and 1/4. Those 3 sizes fit what I've put together here already. And what I like about this is it's very easy to work. It's resistant to most all things. And if you compress it, you can see how it just gets fatter, and then you let it go. It returns to its original shape. That is very good at handling like inconsistencies in harness diameter. Like right here, you get some heavier gauge wires that have some bends. It gets a little bit fatter. This stuff will cover over all of it. It'll lay back flat, it'll flow well, and I'll get it to look nice, at least nice according to what I prefer. So let's get after it. So when I start wrapping a harness like this, you don't want to just start at one end and then like barber pull the tape all the way to the other and then cut it off, and that's where you stop, all right? Because you'll have a tag end over here that will want to start lifting and unraveling. So basically you start from each end and you work in towards the center. At least that's how I prefer to do it. So I've started with the stub that comes down to the distributor right here, and we've started the wrap and we've barber pulled it all the way up here. And now that we've joined into the main harness, that's where I'll make the cut and we can secure that. All right, so now I'll take the tape down to the other end, and I'll do the same thing for the wires that come from the voltage regulator. I'll start the permanent wrap about right here, and I'll just work up a short ways until we enter the main harness. I'll cut the tape and just leave that end. I'll do the same thing for these 2 wires that branch off to the ignition switch. We'll start the wrap here until we get down to the harness, cut it off, leave that end. Then I'll start here, and we can do the wrap and keep our tag end covered. And then we'll come all the way down here. We'll cover the tag end for this takeout. We'll cover the tag end for this one as we move this way. And we can do a permanent wrap to somewhere like in here, somewhere inconspicuous that's going to be covered under the sheathing. I'll make the cut, and then we'll just leave that end. Then I'll take the tape to the other end, and we'll pick back up with the permanent wrap about right here. That's what's going to take care of the tag end from this branch, all right? And then we'll work back to where we ended with the wrap from this direction, and then that's when I'll finally cut the tape, wrap it, so we've basically caged in this whole loop, we've caged in this whole loop, and the only piece that could ever lift and possibly unwrap is in the center. It's not going to be a problem. Your ends are going to stay nice and clean, nice and tight, and your sheathing is going to keep that tape in the center from wanting to unravel from there. That's the long and the short of it. So pretty simple, really. And there we are. So you can see how the harness wants to hold the shape that it had when it was on the engine, running down the valve cover, up the fuel tank support. It's just a lot easier to kind of keep it so it wants to hold itself in a preformed state. So now for the sheathing, and we can wrap it up And just like with the tape, we'll start by doing all the short run takeouts first. This is the one that goes down to the distributor, and we only need to do this one up to the point where it enters the main harness right here. And we'll start with some of the 3/8 diameter, because that's what looks like it's going to be the best fit here. And this is one of the reasons why I like using this stuff. You get to like that larger connector right there, just flare it out a little bit, goes right over the top of it. It's also kind of like a Chinese handcuff where you go to pull it off, it's got some stick, you know, so, or some grab, I should say, is probably a better word for it. And once you get it on that far, you can just go and work it up like that. And what I did up on this end is I cut a slit in it so that we could get it well past where the main sleeve is going to come down to. This end, we completely surrounded the connector to hide that, but it's still plenty easy to get at, plenty easy to hide again. And for this this end that I slit, all right, for this other takeout right here, you've got two options to secure it. I'll show you both of them. You can wrap tape like I did right here, or this stuff actually really should be cut like with a hot knife. I don't have a hot knife, I just use scissors. So sometimes you get a frayed end, and a heat gun is good at kind of like with nylon rope, just taking care of those frays. And you can also stick it down. Just get it a little bit warm. You can see it start to melt a little bit, and then it just lay it right down flat to the rest of the harness. You go all the way around just for time savings. I'll do the rest off camera, but yeah, once that cools, just like right now, that's stuck to the tape. So, and it's still pliable enough. It's not going to crack on you either. So, plenty of options. I've also done that to the other minor takeouts that are on the harness. This is the auxiliary ground for the electronic ignition coil, goes to the battery. So we've got some small gauge sheathing goes up to the main harness there. I did the takeouts to the voltage regulator. This one has to go behind it. It's a little bit bumpy back there, so I wanted some extra on that circuit, some 1/2-inch diameter stuff that takes care of that Y. Also put some 3/8 on the takeouts to the ignition switch. And now the main piece that is going to go over all of this, it has to be fed on from this direction. We're going to go up to this part right here. That's as far as we go. And all of these takeouts now have to be basically pointed in the same direction, okay? So that we can thread that main sheathing over all of this stuff. And what I like about this is the other thing. We can lay it out and gauge about where it's going to run. And everywhere where we have a takeout like this, I'll make note of it. We'll figure out where that is. And like I showed you before, you can compress it and expand it out. What we can do is actually pull those fibers apart a little bit without having to cut anything. So that point that's going to end up right here, when we're threading it on and we get to this eyelet, we shoot that eyelet through that opening so that as we go on, there it is. That's going to stick out just fine. We didn't have to slit anything. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. I've already done this to the headlight harness, okay? And where this ground wire takeout for the base of the voltage regulator is, that's not a slit. I just opened up that weave a little bit and we just pushed that eyelet right out. Already had its own sheathing on besides, goes down under a ways, nice and clean, and it's not going to fray and it won't come apart either. So as we work it down, you can see, yep, it sticks out further all the time. Okay, we'll have to get the rest of this worked down to where it's going to go. Okay, go back here. Looking pretty good. That's where that's going to have to be right there. Yep. Work the rest of the excess down and we'll be about done with this. Highly recommended too. Blunt any of the leading edges that you have to push through this weave with some tape. It'll hang up a lot less, pass through a lot cleaner. So we've got this takeout looking good. This one's looking good as well. Yeah. And final step, I'll just melt any frays that look like they want to develop, and we're done. So that completes the wiring for the entire tractor. I did the same treatment to the headlight harness as well as the charge circuit for the battery. And as long as I had the materials out, I made one additional piece. This little jumper wire is the only thing I would need to convert this tractor back to the standard points ignition distributor. Okay, and it's a pretty simple process, really. These points systems relied on power being put to the coil, which then found its path to ground through the distributor. The electronic kit changed it up a bit. They routed the power to the pickup module in the distributor first, and then to the coil, which in turn found its path to ground through this extra wire that we had to add to the system. So if I ever needed to convert this tractor back to the standard points distributor, you would disconnect the ground wire from the coil, leave that hang, disconnect the pickup from the power circuit. You would then bolt this distributor on in its place. This jumper wire then has a spade terminal connector that would hook into your power feed, and it would hook to the coil. That's the only thing you would have to do to take that electronic distributor and replace it with this points distributor. Simple as that. And just two quick strikes I want to make against the comment section, because I can hear it coming. I know there's going to be a few people that are going to be a bit disappointed that I didn't use a more authentic or original cloth wire loom. Personally, I consider things like wire loom to be a consumable, okay? Just like I consider pieces like points and condensers to be consumables. And what we've done here with the more modern weave style wire loom and the electronic ignition conversion that did away with the points and condensers is these are just the modern equivalents of the consumables to keep the old components in business, okay? That's why we still run the generator instead of an alternator. That's why we still run 6 volt instead of 12 volt. That's why we still do positive ground instead of negative ground. These are the pieces that were replaced periodically anyhow, and this is the best that we have to use to this day. If we were trying to go for an absolute period correct restoration, that all went out the window when we started spraying automotive grade paint with hardeners and other additives into it. And we didn't just assemble this unit as a whole and then just spray one coat of paint and hit what we could hit, okay? We're already not doing things to be period correct. So I guess that's my excuse. And the second point, which is going to be more of a fun fact kind of thing, a couple of people asked why I did not include the harness to the rear mounted light. And you look at number 12, that is a separate harness, cable switch to rear light. That's because the rear light was an option. Okay, so what you would do is just bolt the rear light with the bracket on. It routed down the edge of the deck under here, and then it would cross over behind the clutch pedal. There was another clip right there, and then it routed up to the power box where it just attached to the light switch. So the rear light was its own separate harness, much like the headlights are their own separate harness, separate from what flows up to the rest of the engine. So I'm fixing this tractor up to be configured like it was when my grandfather had it, and actually none of the Farmalls that I have ever been around growing up had a rear light. A couple of them had remnants of an old bracket, but the rear light had long since disappeared. So if a person ever did want to add a rear light, it's a pretty easy separate harness, and you don't have to modify or change anything that I've already done here. So that's going to cover everything electrical. The only work we have left to do now is to get all the bare metal off of this tractor, and then we are waiting for painting weather. So let's wrap it up. So this is what we have left: grill, hood, fuel tank, and everything on the bench. Choke rod, these lines, distributor, carburetor, starter, generator, and related hardware. Once we get the paint on all of those pieces, then it's final assembly and we can wrap up the Preparation H project. However, painting weather will not return here for several weeks at best, more likely 2 months plus. All depends on how this winter and following spring goes. So we are going to put the Preparation H project to bed until that time rolls around. I thank you for watching, everyone, and I hope you'll tune in again come spring when we pick back up on this project. In the meantime, I've got plenty of other things to keep the feet occupied with. See y'all next time.